Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. This time of year, I go around almost daily propping up plants using a variety of supports. These are the homemade wire ones that we've used for years and years. But no plant is more dramatic in the garden at the moment as the Crown Imperial Fritillary. It has this lovely, crazy top knot of foliage and these big hanging bells of flower. This one is rhubarb, it's orange. We've got the yellow ones in the spring garden, and of course these lovely chocolatey stems. It can get a bit bashed. We had a frost the other day and it was bent almost double, but it's recovered. But nevertheless, I'm just going to support it. And the art is always just to do enough and no more. You don't want to make the plant look unnaturally constrained. And one of the facts that I love about this plant is that as well as being so beautiful, it is pollinated by a bird, the blue-tit. Now, coming up on today's programme. Adam visits a beautiful garden in West Sussex to talk to the head gardener, Ben Pope.
Ben, I feel like I've landed on the most luxurious bed. This place, it feels so comfortable.
Oh, I'm really pleased you feel like that, yeah. That's what we want, I think, when people come into the garden.
We visit the garden of Glenn Shapiro, who has the national collection of hepaticas.
For me, hepatica become a lifelong obsession. They'll be with me for the rest of my life.
We catch up with Sue Kent in her garden in Swansea as she embarks on a new gardening challenge.
There's one thing I've never tried to grow before: mushrooms.
They like a nice shady area, so underneath this tree will be great, and they grow on wood chips. So I'm going to make this my mushroom bed.
And I shall be planting up a window box for a sunny spot. That is Rayum palmatum. It's going to be the centrepiece of what has become the new bog garden. We've made this crescent shape, sort of kidney border that curves around the back of the pond. Now, I've begun planting. I've got some hostas in. These are the leaves of Iris sibirica, a few thalictrums around the back, and some shuttlecock ferns. But now I want to add some more set pieces, and this is the biggest of the lot. Now, this Rayum has been growing at the back of the pond here for the last few years, but because it was so dry, it never really developed. So dug it up, and I'm going to replant it. The Rayum is big and bold and dramatic with these lovely serrated leaves, and that is going to hold centre stage. But accompanying it, I've got another really good dramatic bog plant, which is Dharmara peltata, or you might know it as Peltiphyllum peltatum. Now, this is smaller, but its flowers appear in spring before there's any sign of foliage. And then that dies down, and then the leaves start to grow. And you get these oval plates, like inverted umbrellas. It will create about a 3-4 foot tall plant that will love the wet of the bog garden. Now, for colour, one of my favourite damp garden flowers are ligularias. There are many different types, but this is called Ligularia the Rocket. And it has tall yellow spires of flower held on black stems, and the leaves, which are cut and jagged, are also really good too. But if it's going to be in sunshine, it has to have wet feet, and if you can't provide wet feet, you must put it in shade. But it's tall and will go well at the back, like that. Now, the final planting I'm going to do at the moment is an iris. And this is a Japanese iris, Iris ensata. And it has wonderful purple flowers. Quite happy in shade too. So I'm going to put it over here, which is the shady side. I'll start with the centrepiece, the ram. It's actually very solid and very heavy, so I'm not going to hold it for too long. But we need to dig a substantial hole. There we are, that will go. Beautiful job. Now, I will, of course, water these in very well indeed. OK, that's one. Now the peltifilum. And this needs, obviously, a smaller hole. Now, these rhizomes stay on the surface like that. I'll get the rest in, and then we can wait and watch this bed develop. Now, what I'm essentially doing is not so much changing the garden, but just slightly reshaping it, using the same kind of plants, hopefully to much better effect. But last summer, Adam went to see an altogether more ambitious project. He visited a beautiful wall garden in its full glory that had been substantially redesigned a few years ago. And he talked to the head gardener about what it's like to be custodian of a project of this kind.
I've come to West Sussex to see a wonderful garden that's been given a new lease of life over the last 15 years. But more than that, I'm looking forward to meeting the head gardener. His name's Ben Pope, and I've heard an awful lot about him. The property owners commissioned Arnie Maynard to design the garden. As it developed, Ben was appointed head gardener to take it forward. And for the last 14 years, that's exactly what he has done. Moulding and developing the garden into something unique and truly beautiful. Ben, I've just walked into this garden. I feel like I've landed on the most luxurious bed. This place, it feels so comfortable.
Oh, I'm really pleased you feel like that, yeah. That's what we, that's what we want, I think, when people come into the garden.
What was it like when you first came?
There was a garden here before, there has been for the last 200-300 years, but Arnie was designing this area and he'd stripped it back to the bare bones. He'd left all the really important things, so like the lovely old apple trees, the layout, as it were. Yeah. The beds were completely empty, but it still had that atmosphere. I walked through the Moongate and straight away I was just like, I would love to work here.
The place, I said it feels beautiful, but it carries a certain atmosphere.
For sure, yeah. As you walk around the garden, there's different parts of atmosphere. Different things that feel cool and calm. And then in here, it's quite full on, as you probably said, exuberant and gushing. And you'll go to another part, it's quiet space, it's a moment to breathe. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do, sort of capture the atmosphere of specific parts of the garden, but also the seasons.
I'd love today to find out exactly how you garden this space. Can I get my hands in the soil and do a bit?
Of course you can, be a pleasure.
In early autumn, the gardening team are kept busy, harvesting produce for the house. It's a key part of the head gardener role to ensure the walled garden is bursting with cut flowers, fruit and vegetables. I do love the way that you've used the verticals here, mate.
You get so much use out of a tiny little space, and it's great for, any size garden. This is an arch, but it could be a fence panel, it could be a wall, it could be all sorts of things. We combine, obviously, edibles.
Yeah.
So you've got the bologna beans here, you can do climbing squashes, but also ornamentals. So the lovely, Ipomea lobata, sort of looking really, really good. And these things really enjoy, the late summer. They really come into their own.
Straight away, raspberries and bits, you're not growing them in the obvious way. You've got them as fans, these are working as cordons. So there's a beauty there, straight away.
Yeah, there certainly is a beauty, but there's also practical reason. You get so much in a tiny bit of space. You're literally a foot and a half out,
Yeah.
and you've got a crop there to pick.
Yeah.
Homegrown is definitely best, you know, picking it at that point when it's just ripe, you know, and then also the varieties you can choose.
Yeah, exactly. And whether it becomes jams or goes in a freezer. There is a lovely, harmonious feel to the place. The soft, romantic planting is repeated throughout. But there's something else that pulls the whole garden together, and that is the creative use of topiary and clipped hedges. Keeping this lot in shape takes time, so I'm going to give Ben a hand to cloud prune this box.
It's great to have some, you know, company.
Yeah. I'm clipping this, and actually in reality you don't seem to have much in the way of sort of caterpillar damage.
We had it 3 years ago, and I thought, oh, it's migrated out of London, it's reached us, you know.
Yeah.
Every year now we sort of have a little bit, but all I can put it down to is we've got masses of bats and garden birds, you know, and I think between the two of them, they're just kind of never had to spray for it, so.
If we're brave enough,
Yes.
and we can offer enough diversity of habitat and food in our gardens, just to back off, wildlife will play its part and come. It's just sometimes, isn't it, being brave enough to do that, really.
It really is, yeah, and like you say, it's having that courage to just hold back and watch.
What do you reckon? About there?
It's looking good, yeah, yeah. Lovely.
You can always moan about me when I've gone, can't you? Now, Ben has more stuff for me to do. We are finishing cutting back the wildflower meadow. So once you've sort of done that, you sort of leave down for what, week, 10 days, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it all depends on the weather conditions, really. You're just waiting for it to dry out, you know, the seeds within it to dry so that they'll fall through as we rake and collect.
Because have you got a yellow rattle in here?
We do, yeah, but it flowers much earlier in the year and has already dropped its seed. And again, the yellow rattle's helping to control the grass figure.
And the mix in here of wildflowers, you know, and even here I think I'm raking up some alchemilla and bits and pieces. So what's the thinking with that?
You know, like any gardener, I'm kind of treating the meadow a bit like a border.
Yeah.
And you know, it's for diversity, you know, and also to make it look attractive.
Even looking over there where you've got the canes in, I presume that's marking something?
Yes, yeah, so as we're cutting through, we've got orchids that have moved in.
Wow.
They're helleborines and dactylorizas, so not the rarest, but equally absolutely lovely to have. And we want them to seed as much as possible, so we won't cut them down.
See that face there? That's a jealous face.
You love it.
It's slightly jealous.
I think we're almost pretty much there, so.
Cup of tea?
Yeah, slice of cake.
Now you're talking, mate.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to be a good place. I don't think, mate, people do enough of this. Oh, my. And you've made this cake, haven't you?
I have indeed, yeah.
So obviously everybody's sat and watched you and gone, what a gardener. And now they've got to know that actually you can make cake as well.
What I've realised is you've created a garden that provides a million moments. But more than anything, you get the sense that the soul to this garden is actually provided by you.
Oh, well, that's an amazing thing to say, and I'd love to claim it. But yeah, my hard work, along with everyone else who's involved, has kind of hopefully given you those moments today. I'm really, really pleased you enjoyed it.
And I'll tell you what, mate, the cake is...
It's a winner, isn't it?
I think there is a slight tendency for us to associate fruit growing with a beautiful wall garden like that and all the images of the English country garden and somehow feel you can't do it in a small space. It's just not true. I mean, as we saw, you can grow fruit vertically very successfully, and fresh seasonal fruit is one of life's true treats. Now, I'm growing fruit here, which is melon, but they need heat. So ideally you need to grow them in a greenhouse unless you're in a very sheltered part of the country. I've got a variety here actually called Alvaro, and it's a cantaloupe variety which will be absolutely delicious. Melons are cucurbits, same family as cucumbers, pumpkins, squashes, and they will grow quite large. And they're greedy plants from day one. When you're sowing any cucurbit, whether it be a melon or a large pumpkin, put the seed on its side. So you slide it edgeways into the compost. This will help with germination and prevent rotting. I'll just cover them up lightly. As soon as they germinate and I get ready to pot them on, which will be in about 4 weeks' time, they need to go into a really good, rich potting mixture. And if we're going to grow them in containers, which I normally do, I add 50% garden compost. So it's a really rich compost. Now, the important thing is that these have heat from day one. Heat to germinate, heat to grow, heat for the fruit to form and ripen. Right, those will go into the greenhouse onto a heated mat. A windowsill's fine as long as it doesn't cool down. However, I'm going to grow another cucurbit along with these, which are a bit more forgiving, which are cucumbers. This is a variety called Passandra. You can grow cucumbers outside, but I think they do much better indoors. And you plant them in an identical fashion. Cover them over. My counsel of perfection is that anything that can be picked up separately should have its own label. So, this will now go to the greenhouse, kept watered, and as soon as they appear and they're growing strongly, I will pot them on. But that won't be for another month or so. And then their lives, as far as I can manage, will be one rich with heat, moisture, and food. And hopefully the reward will be delicious melons and cucumbers. Now, it's time to visit one of your gardens. And we're going to Lancashire, to Chorley, and the garden of Helen Winstanley.
Hello, I'm Helen, and I'd like to welcome you to my front garden. As you can see, it's quite small, but it's full of roses. My love for gardening, I think, comes from my parents. Both my parents are very good gardeners, but it's my mother who loved the roses. From when I was a very young girl, she used to take me into the garden, show me her favourite roses, tell me all about the difference between hybrid teas and floribundas. It only became natural to me when I came to grow my own garden. The first flower I went to was the rose. All I do with this garden is, come January, February, I give them all a really good prune, as far down as they'll go, leave them to it until about March. I get a good rose fertiliser, give a good sprinkle on the surface of the soil, and then give it a good 2-3 inches mulch of a good, well-rotted manure. And then just leave them to get on with it. And then when they start flowering, the only thing you have to do after that is to give them a dead head every now and then, as often as you possibly can, just to help to keep the rose flowering. You could stand here right now, you'd wish you could smell what I can smell. It's absolutely heavenly. Going from purples from the Rhapsody and blues to the yellows of Pilgrim. I hope you agree this front garden, I think, is quite spectacular. Which just shows what you can do with a front garden these days. You don't have to pave them over. You can actually create something really special. I'm very, very proud of it. And hopefully you've enjoyed looking at it. Thank you very much.
So good to see a front garden used as a garden, and a lovely one at that, and not as a car park. Every spring I look forward to the dog's tooth violet, the Eristronians. This is one called White Beauty, and they like the woodland shade. And you can see they have these quite lush leaves and these flowers that hang down, yet are splayed back as though astonished. And some flowers you do need to get down and get up close to really enjoy them. Now, we went up to Lancashire, near Morecambe Bay, to visit somebody who became entranced with the delicacy and jewel-like intensity of hepaticas.
There is an absolutely infinite variety among hepatica, all on a very tiny jewel-like scale. They're very, very addictive, actually. They should come with a health warning. I'm Glen Shapiro, and we're at Silverdale in North Lancashire. We moved to Hazelwood Farm over 40 years ago, and I was farming blue-faced Leicester sheep. So I really did some research into what would do well in the yard and in pots. Pretty soon I discovered hepatica. So I had them in pots outside my lambing shed, and we'd be so busy in March, and it was just so tranquil looking into those tiny, exquisitely beautiful flowers, and I was absolutely hooked. Completely fell in love with them. On one occasion, I spotted a cross between my nobilis apple blossom and my acutilloba. So it had the shape of the acutilloba leaves and the marbling of apple blossom. And eventually it flowered after about 4 years. It got the name Froggy from its lovely froggy-looking leaves, sort of marked actually in very froggy colours. The blue flowers actually give an impression of a pond rising above the leaves. That was the start of quite a few hazelwood hepaticas that have appeared since. With the excitement of having produced a few cultivars, I realised that there could be life beyond the sheep, as everything was starting to get a bit too heavy for me. And by 2011, I went for a national collection of hepatica. Once I had sold up my sheep flock, then they moved into the old lambing shed, and that's my main hepatica house now. Over 1,700 on my official list in this building. So this is a very big favourite. It is from Japan, Hepatica japonica, forma magna, and I call it my spooky beauty. It's just such an unbelievably intense colour. And then this is a complete contrast. It's Hepatica americana, ashwood marble, and very, very tiny, dainty flowers. I just noticed it's finished flowering, and I'm going to slip that flower into a tea bag, and it'll just sit there till it drops its seed. Over 20 years ago, this whole area was still scrub, so I planted this little beauty in this hole in the rock. And actually, they often grow in holes in rocks in the Alps. They do always need the shade and reasonably open woodland. This is Hepatica transylvanica. It only grows in the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania. I've got a theory that they sort of stitch themselves into the slope, sort of stitching underground and appearing somewhere else. This is Hepatica cross Leiteri. It's a cross between Hepatica nobilis and Hepatica maxima. It's actually infertile, which is lovely because it's stayed in flower for 2 months now. You can just plant them in the garden and let them do their own thing. They'll seed around a bit and you get big swathes of them, and very, very beautiful. Even if you didn't have a garden, you could always grow Hepatica. They're wonderful in troughs and pots, and if you had a window box or a backyard, you could still grow Hepatica. I'm very fond of growing them in strawberry pots. You do have to turn them occasionally so they get their fair share of light. For me, Hepatica have become a lifelong obsession, even when I can't manage the garden anymore. I'm sure they'll be with me for the rest of my life.
I really like the positive spin on sterile plants, which can be seen as a negative, but actually, of course, if the plant isn't putting its energy into producing seed, then it is bound to flower for longer. And what a brilliant idea about the tea bags. Spent tea bag, of course, makes a perfect little, very fine net to capture those tiny seeds. This is white valerian. And it looks like nothing now, but by the end of May and in June, it's one of my favourite plants in the garden. It's tall and spectacular. However, although they look brilliant for about 3 or 4 weeks, are not so good for the rest of the time. So what I'm doing is taking out quite a lot of the valerian, by no means all, and redistributing it around the garden. I think it'll look particularly good in the writing garden. That will create space as well as making the writing garden look a lot better. Now, still to come. We meet a self-confessed houseplant addict.
I just really like the effect of having a really lush green home. I wouldn't really say I'm going for the jungle vibe necessarily, but I just like the way plants make me feel relaxed and just keep me calm.
And we visit Sue Kent near Swansea as she begins a prestigious new gardening project.
I'm very excited to see if it works. I haven't got a clue. I'm just crossing my toes that the whole thing will develop as it should do. Watch this space.
I'm going to plant up a window box. I like window boxes. You see them from inside the house, and they're almost like house plants and part of your view of the world. And of course, they're part of the public face of the house, like the front garden. And whatever you're growing in them, the rules of gardening still apply. So this is going to be a window box for a sunny position. And that will affect what I plant and how I plant it. The first thing to do, doesn't matter what the situation or what your window box is made out of, it must have drainage. And you can see that I've drilled holes in the bottom of this, lots of drainage. And if you want to keep the drainage good, it's a good idea to sit it on something. Don't just lay it flat on the windowsill, but on blocks of some kind. So having made the drainage holes, I want to make sure they don't get blocked. And to that end, I'm going to use crocks. We keep all our broken pots. And if I just put them loosely along the bottom, what it will do is stop those holes clogging up. If you don't have crocks, you can use stones, just anything where the moisture can go through, but the compost won't. Right. Now, because this is a sunny, south-facing windowsill, I'm going to plant plants that have adapted to hot, dry conditions. So I've made a potting mix, which is heavy, which is my standard potting mix, and lots of grit, and as much as 50-50. So I'll put a layer on the bottom over the crocks, like that. Now the key plant of this arrangement is going to be this prostrate rosemary. I love prostrate rosemary. It wants to grow horizontally, and then when it comes to an edge, will spill down in a lovely aromatic cascade, and it has these beautiful blue flowers in early spring. So I'm going to put one at the edge. So I'll put another one in the middle, like that, and then one at the end. The other great advantage of rosemary is it's evergreen. So this is going to look good all the year round. Now in between, I'm going to put a herbaceous plant. This is an ornamental garlic, Tolbagia. It's a herbaceous perennial. It'll die back every year and then grow back strongly. Now you can see this is fairly pot-bound. And if you do have a pot-bound plant, just break the roots lightly and that will trigger regrowth that will grow out. Now this has chive-like foliage and then allium-like flowers. You can eat both of them and will flower for months on end, from early summer, late spring, well into autumn. I'll have it near the edge. And these will rise up. So the flowers will be up here about roughly where my hands are, maybe about 2 foot tall. So we'll put some soil around those to hold them in position. I've got one more plant to add, and this is a bulb, a summer bulb from South Africa, and they are nerines. Now nerines produce a long stem, and there's this starburst of flower in late summer and autumn. And this is nerine amandi. Now the secret of planting nerines is, unlike most bulbs, which you plant deep, you keep half the bulb, i.e. all the snout, above the ground. So I just make a little dip and pop that in like that, so it's sticking well out. Now, it's worth remembering that although these are plants that love baking heat and they need good drainage, they do need water. So keep them watered thoroughly once a week, and the water should run freely through and out of it. Now we can add a little bit more compost. That is now ready to go on your windowsill. And next week, I will be making a window box for a shady position. And we'll see how this grows. But now we're off to visit Sue Kent near Swansea. Now, last year we saw her on her allotment growing a range of vegetables. But this year she's going to tackle a rather unusual crop in her back garden. And she's keen to share with us some big news.
Winter has been mild here, allowing me to get out in the garden and reassess my vegetable pot. Moving some shrubs and working out how to make my garden even more productive this year.
I've divided up my rhubarb and moved it. It's left me with this big area here, and I've been wondering what to grow.
I love experimenting, and I'm up for trying all kinds of fruit and veg in the garden. But there's one thing I've never tried to grow before: mushrooms.
I love mushrooms, but I haven't got enough knowledge to forage. So I was down the pub chatting to a young gardener who suggested that I try King Stropharia. And they like a nice shady area, so underneath this tree will be great, and they grow on wood chips. So I'm going to make this my mushroom bed, and I'm going to lay down some cardboard first. It's rather like a lasagna. First we've got the layer of cardboard, then I'm going to add a layer of wood chip, then I'm going to add the mushroom spawn, and I'm going to repeat this process. Hello, Mr. Robin. Hello. Hello. How are you today? Mr. Robin lives in the wall behind this apple tree. Shall I see if there's any more slugs in here for you? This is the mushroom spawn, and this contains the mycelium. It's going to send a network of underground root-like threads, which will eventually send up its fruits, which are the mushrooms. It's going to feed off the wood chip, and it's beneficial to the soil.
I put a layer of wood chips on top of the mushroom spawn and then repeat the mushroom spawn and wood chips again. And the final layer of my mushroom lasagna is some straw. I'm making sure the whole bed is no more than 2 feet deep because I don't want to starve the mycelium of oxygen.
This straw is going to preserve the moisture, protect the mushrooms and give them a lovely bit of warmth.
Finally, I'll give them a good soak. To make sure it's got plenty of moisture in there for the first few weeks, I'll need to water them quite regularly.
There could be other fungi in the wood chip that I'm not going to eat, so I've got to be very careful and gem up on what King Stropharia look like. But their other name is wine cap, so that gives me a clue. The cap of the mushroom is a winey colour. I've got to be patient, which isn't my middle name, because these mushrooms can take 3 to 8 months before they start appearing.
Now I'm so excited to share with you some really big news. To be honest, I'm still taking it all in.
Since November, my life has completely changed. When the RHS asked me to submit a design for the Hampton Court Palace Garden Festival. Now, I'm not a designer and it is a big ask, but very exciting, so I thought I'd give it a go. I only had 2 weeks and I had to submit technical drawings, which I've done. My garden's 5 metres by 5 metres, which is the small garden category, thank goodness. And most challengingly, I had to do a 3D impression. Now, a lot of the time, garden designers pay someone to do a painting, but I don't have the funds and I didn't have the time, so I thought I'd give it a go myself. So I got my Monet books out and I used Monet's style to make it slightly impressionistic, and here is the final result, which has now been accepted.
It's an easy maintenance garden that uses repurposed materials and perennial planting. It's designed for people with limited physical dexterity and strength, or for those with busy lives who want a garden but don't have lots of time. A place to sit, relax, lie down and snooze. And importantly for me, somewhere I can feel the flowers beneath my feet.
I'm very excited to see if it works. I haven't got a clue. I'm just crossing my toes to, that the whole thing will develop as it should do. And watch this space.
Over the coming months, I've got a lot to do. I found a landscaper to build the show garden, a social enterprise to make my feature wall, all within budget, and I'll take whatever help I can find. I was very lucky recently to be given special permission by the head gardener at Aberglasney Gardens to dig up some beautiful thalictrum, which I'd like to work into my planting scheme.
And this is in the shade to sort of slow up its growing, so hopefully it'll be ready for the show. And of course, there's the plants. And I'm lucky enough to have a nurseryman to grow most of them for me. But there are key plants that I'm going to grow myself as backups. One of them is Erigeron, which has a small daisy flower and they have white petals and they turn to pink as they get older. The reason I love them, and I've included them in the design, is because I know them and I feel confident in how they're going to perform and they won't let me down. They flower from spring to autumn and they self-seed everywhere. Now I need 80 of this for the design, and I've got plants like this which I've divided into pots and they're doing well. But I'm going around the garden now to try and find some more, and I can see lots of seedlings in different pots. And the lovely thing about finding seedlings in pots is it's like free plants, and I don't want anything to go to waste, so it's a win-win situation. Now I'm going to grow an annual from Australia, which is Brachyscum. They're again small daisies, and they come in white, they come in blue, but for my design I want purple. They are very small seeds, if you can see them. So I'm going to sow them in the seed tray and then I'm going to transplant them as they grow into individual pots. The other nice thing about them is that they like partial shade or full sun, which means that I can be quite flexible as I don't really know the location of my plot yet. I'm going to be seeing that next month. They've got a shrubby-like leaf that will mean that I think they're going to be suitable for the understory of my planting scheme. They could also be grown and shown in individual pots in my special area of my design. Cover with a fine layer of soil, very lightly. I'm going to take these inside and put them on my windowsill to germinate, and hopefully they're going to be a glorious addition to my Hampton Court design.
We will be following Sue's road to Hampton Court over the coming weeks and months, and it seems very exciting. What I find as exciting as the big dramatic moments in this garden are the slow and sometimes quite subtle changes. For example, here on the mound, the latest venture was to make the new beds in the front, but they've all been planted with this consistent colour theme of pale yellow and pale blue. At the moment, we've got the yellow of the bud-like tulip that's working with the yellow of the daffodils and the hyacinths, yellow queen, the forsythia, and then touches of blue from the muscari and the forget-me-nots, which are beginning to open, even though the weather has been a bit against them. And at this time of year, those changes are happening from day to day. And to be part of that, I always find thrilling. It's time to visit another one of your gardens. It belongs to Richard Prabhakar, who's a busy working mother who has nevertheless created a garden packed with year-round interest.
Hi, my name is Richa and I live in Slough with my husband and 2 children. I have a traditional rectangular garden. I have a very busy job, so I get very little time to take care of my garden, but whatever time I get, I enjoy gardening. I have created my garden to suit my working life. For example, these hanging baskets I have created from succulents because they hardly need any watering and they look beautiful. I have fruit trees, vegetables, and lots of flowers. I have developed it to maintain interest throughout the year. It starts from daffodils, then tulips, and then roses, and goes on like this till November or December. And my husband helped me build a vegetable patch last year, where I have been experimenting with a lot of different vegetables. These are my little eggplants which are ready for harvesting. Earlier this year, I received a seed packet for tomatoes, and this is the beautiful result. This is a 7-year-old apple tree which my son actually grew from seed. Since last year, it has started giving us apples as well. Thank you for visiting my garden, and thank you Gardeners World for all the tips and guidance. Bye!
I really admire Richard's aubergines, which look fantastic grown outside. I think I could do that here at Longmeadow. And a brilliant idea to have succulents as a hanging basket. Genius. By the way, we are still welcoming films from you of your garden, but it doesn't have to be a tour of your garden. It could just be a really good idea or a tip that you find works really well for you and you want to share with all of us. And if you go to our website, you can find out how you can send your films in. I'm planting these cornflowers, which I sowed last September. pricked them out into plugs, and then I kept them in a cold frame over winter. So now that it's beginning to warm up a little bit, I've got nice strong plants with a good root system ready to plant out here in the Paradise Garden. This is one called Blue Diadem. I've got another one called Black Ball. And what I really like about it is that you get these bright points of colour from the cornflowers and this intense blue coming up through the grasses. I've got a couple of trays, and the way I do it is to divide them up and put half a tray in each of the 4 beds, just wherever there is a gap. So you get a certain amount of uniformity, but also this sense of the colour just emerging randomly. I've always been clear from the outset of the effect that I want from the Paradise Garden, which is to create somewhere of delight that is open and loose and yet really intense with colour and fragrance. And what you do with your garden really depends on what you want it to do for you. And if you know what you want from your garden, then you can plant accordingly. But of course that assumes that you have a garden to do that in. However, we went to visit a gardener who has created his own plant paradise indoors.
I just really like the effect of having a really lush green home. I wouldn't really say I'm going for the jungle vibe necessarily, but I just like the way plants make me feel relaxed and just keep me calm. So yeah, I just like as much green as possible, especially inside, less colour, but just more foliage. Hi, I'm Paul McCabe. I live in Salford, and this is where I come to escape. It's just instant. As soon as I walk through the door, as soon as I open the door and I see the greenery in the plants, I just go down a couple of notches, especially if I'm doing things with the plants and I'm watering and I'm feeding and just checking them. I just forget about everything. I work on the trams in Manchester city centre, so it is very urban, so this is an escape when I come home. I suppose as an introvert, I find it hard just like being around a lot of people. I find it hard communicating sometimes with people. I tend to open up more when I'm talking to people about plants and I'm telling them how to care for plants. I feel like it lights a spark inside me, and I kind of forget maybe that I'm usually this quiet, introverted person. It just brings another side of me. One of my earliest memories would be growing plants in my nana's garden. I was just always doing things with plants from a very young age, even house plants when I was a kid, cacti, growing all sorts of cacti on the windowsill. I'm lucky because I do have the skylights. It's a west facing at the back, so the sun does go around, and then I get bright light in the afternoons, which can be a problem sometimes because a lot of the houseplants don't necessarily want bright, direct sunlight. Columnia arguta is it's a really nice hanging plant, and when it's in bloom, it looks absolutely stunning. Hanging plants, philodendrons or pothos as well, they just look really nice the way they just hang quite naturally, and the leaves will turn to the light as well. I would say this is like my hanging gardens of Manchester. So I quite like the forest cacti, epiphytes, again just the way that they hang, and usually you get flowers on those specimens as well. And also Spanish moss. I find Spanish moss is so easy. It is an air plant, so you do need to mist it with rainwater regularly. I like the placement of plants. I like how you can use a plant and place it in a location, even one plant, and it just transforms the room. I'm always moving the plants around. I think at the moment my favourite plant is the Monstera deliciosa, because it's such a big plant and I've had it for such a long time, and I just love the form and how it just sits. I think I like it because it is such a common plant, to be fair, and I think most people just don't actually support them correctly. So in the case of my Monstera, I have a hook in the ceiling with a wire, so that supports the entire weight of that plant. It does need quite a lot of food, fertilisation in the growing months because it uses a lot of energy to grow those big leaves. Caladiums are quite new to me. If you just buy the corm, you plant it in a bit of free-draining compost, and then within summer, you've got a really gorgeous, lush houseplant. This is Amaranta kirchoviana, and it's one of the prayer plants. At certain times of day, the leaves will move. So in the evenings, the leaves will move up, and then during the day, the leaves settle down and go flat. When you have so many houseplants, every day is a maintenance day. So as I go around, I'll check the moisture, I'll feed them if necessary, and I'm always looking at the leaves and even the roots in some cases and looking for signs of pests or disease. It really relaxes me, and it definitely isn't a chore. It's something that I look forward to do. Certainly with the anthuriums, I like to keep them in clear pots so I can actually see the health of the roots, because they can get root rot quite easily. So if you overwater them and you start losing some roots, take it out of the medium and repot it. The calatheas and the prayer plants, they can be quite prone to getting various pests, and the most common ones being red spider mites and thrips as well. So I routinely wash the leaves of those, whether I can see any signs of pests or not. So this is Alocasia black velvet, and you just get that really velvety leaf, and when the light shines on it, you just get like a shimmer on the leaf. A really straightforward, easy house plant. So this is a cactus that I've had probably for about 15 years now. This was really easy to propagate. I just clipped one of the pups off the side and popped it into some really free draining soil. Bougainvillea as a houseplant is quite an unusual plant. This one I've had for about 25 years, and it's one of the few houseplants that would tolerate direct sunshine, direct light for long periods throughout the day. So this cabinet I just used to keep the plants that really need certain conditions, high humidity. So I've got the LED lighting, I've got fans to keep the airflow moving, I've got heat mats as well, which is stimulating the root growth. So it's just a way for me to control the environment much better. So this is the philodendron micans. It's really straightforward to take cuttings. I just snip just above that leaf node, and you can see there I've actually got a root, one of the aerial roots, which will form the basis of my rooted plant. And then I'm just popping that into a free draining soil, and then I'll probably put maybe 5 or 6 within one pot to get a nice bushy plant, and then keep it warm, somewhere warm and bright. And as soon as you start seeing roots coming through the bottom, you know you've got a good established plant. And it's a really cost-effective way of propagating plants. I think someone starting with houseplants is just give it a go, or just start with something really small and just build it from there. If I go into someone's home and there's no plants, it just seems really flat. So put a plant in your room, put a plant in your home.
Well done. Well done. Good girls. Shall we put some broccoli in here? Oh, would you like it? You're talking to me, are you? Okay, thank you. I have actually learnt relatively recently how right Paul is, that plants inside a house improve the quality of life beyond measure. I'm certainly learning to love houseplants. But I think you'd be pushed to grow purple sprouting broccoli indoors. It's quite a demanding plant, takes a lot of space, but I think it is an absolute treat. It's ready for harvest between sort of the middle of February and the middle of April, so coming right to the end of its run. And you can see it produces these small florets that you just break off like that. And these, with a little bit of leaf attached, you just cook whole. And if you do get a central one, just pinch it out, and that will encourage side shoots. Now, I have to say that I protected these under a net for much of the winter, and then they outgrew the net, and the pigeons have had a go at them, frost has had a go at it, but it's still producing. And the time to sow it is now. You sow it when you harvest it, and it's slow to grow. It'll do nothing for you, won't give you anything, until next year, but it's worth the wait. It's absolutely delicious. Now, as well as sowing broccoli this weekend, here are some other jobs that you can do. If you're growing tender annuals like these cosmos, prick them out as soon as they develop true leaves. Handle them carefully, holding them by a leaf, and don't worry if they flop, they'll soon perk up. You can either put them into plugs or into small pots like these. Water them and keep them protected until the risk of frost has passed, and then plant them out. And that should be round about the middle of May. Early flowering shrubs, like this winter flowering honeysuckle, should be pruned as soon as the flowering display is over. Next year's flowers are carried on this year's new shoots, so cut away any congested growth to let light and air into the shrub. Everybody loves sunflowers, and they come in a huge range of colours and sizes. Now is the time to sow them. Some seeds are quite small, but still sow them in pots rather than seed trays, putting 2 seeds per pot. And then be prepared to weed out or transplant the smaller of the 2. So you end up with one strongly growing plant that will be ready to put into the garden after the last frost. One of the really good things about growing bulbs in pots is you can move them around as the colours change and develop. So you build these little cameos where the colours work well together, and that changes as the flowers change. So for example, these tulips have only just started to appear and open out. We have Apricot Beauty, which is a pink just touched with a little bit of peach, and then not yet open, but will soon appear, is Mistress Grey, which is one of my favourites. It's a very smoky pink. And the rather hard yellow of the daffodils that I did have here didn't work with them at all. So I've moved a daffodil called Minnow from the mound, which is this much paler, softer yellow, and also the Valerie Finis Muscari from the table, put them all together, and those pastel colours work much better. And don't forget to water your tulips in particular, but also any bulbs in pots. Give them a good soak. That will prolong flowering, encourage plenty of leaf growth, and of course it's the leaves that will feed into next year's flowers. Well, that's it for today. I hope you have a really good Easter weekend, and I'll see you back here at Longmeadow at 8 o'clock next Friday. So until then, bye-bye.